What's going on, everybody? The big news is announced. The Broncos are trading with the Saints for Sean Payton to be the next head coach of the Denver Broncos. Welcome into Orange and Blue today. A special edition, Rachel Veal. We've got Andrew Mason and Cecil Lammy joining us from Alabama. Gentlemen, how are you and what's your first take on the news?
This was my pipe dream scenario, and I feel so just up in the air and euphoria, even though I don't like giving up the draft picks at all. But I thought Deion Sanders was a pipe dream, and he's a Boulder coach at CU. I thought Sean Payton was a pipe dream, and now he's the coach of the Denver Broncos.
I want to know what the final draft compensation is. If it's 2 first-round picks, that's too much. I would even say that a first and both thirds this year is too much. If the compensation is right, I think it's a perfectly fine hire. For the Broncos, personally, I'm not a fan of this because of the Bountygate stuff from a decade ago. But, bygones be bygones. Sean Payton's the coach of the Broncos.
Fair enough there, Mace. I do have the compensation. It's Denver's 2023 first-round pick and next year's second-round pick for Sean Payton and the Saints' 2024 third. What's your take after you hear that?
Ooh, okay. Well, it's interesting that basically you trade down around, you turn a second into a third in next year's draft, so you're out of the second. So that's reasonable compensation. You knew it was going to be the first-round pick, but at least it wasn't giving up a second-round pick and not getting anything back. The Broncos still have 2 day 2 picks this year, still have 2 day 2 picks next year.
Yeah, the compensation is more than fair, honestly. I was really nervous and worried that it would be a couple of first-rounders and more money and more picks, and then it's not. So really, fair compensation. And now let's go. A guy that's here to fix Russell Wilson and then fix the future. I'm sure we're going to talk about it all today.
Cecil, you mentioned it. It's the fixing of Russell Wilson. That's the talk, and that's what everybody wants. What have you seen, without including Drew Brees in the equation, out of Sean Payton and how he can fix a quarterback?
Do we remember what Jameis Winston looked like before he was hurt a couple of years ago? Jameis Winston coming off at 30 for 30, right? And I'm not talking about the ESPN special, but the 30 interception season. He was efficient. He was smart with the football. He moved the ball well for that Saints offense. So I know it's a small sample size. And Winston ended up getting hurt, and Taysom Hill and Trevor Siemian or whoever playing for that team. No, you look at what he did with Jameis there. And again, smaller sample size, but Jameis, that good quarterback that he was just making horrible decisions with Tampa, trying to force things, throw downfield way too much. That turned around under Sean Payton. So we do have an example. If you look closer and if you know what Jameis Winston was and then what he became under Sean Payton.
It's going to require Russell Wilson becoming a different quarterback. The thing is, he wants to become a different quarterback. He wants to evolve into Drew Brees. So logically, the person who helped get Drew Brees to a higher level, although Brees was playing pretty well before he got to New Orleans when he was with the Chargers the last couple of years in 04 and 05. So you'd say, okay, the person who has the best chance of getting Russell Wilson to Drew Brees in that style is someone who had a huge part in making Drew Brees a Hall of Fame quarterback. The question then becomes, does Russell Wilson have the ability? Because with Jameis Winston, it was a matter of getting him to kind of to go short, intermediate, and Payton succeeded at that. Can Russell Wilson do that? It's going to require him becoming a different quarterback. I know he wants to, but the question is, does he have the ability in him to do that? And that's what we're all going to find out this year.
Now, obviously, the big thing is the picks, and you both are out in Alabama right now, getting ready for the Senior Bowl. How can the Broncos move forward since they don't have a first-round pick at the O-line position?
I mean, they can find guys in the third round. It's just when you get to that stage, and of course they still have their 2 third-rounders this year. When you get to that stage, you're not talking about plug and play. Maybe they're ready, maybe they're not. So you're probably going to look, if for example, if you're looking into free agency and saying, we need to take another swing at a right tackle, then it's probably going to be in free agency. You're just not going to find plug and play where the Broncos are picking in all likelihood.
Well, and I look at the situation and I say, they don't have a first rounder. For now, you tag and trade Draymond Jones, what do you got? You take your 2 third rounders, you move around, what do you got? You can be maneuverable now if you're the Denver Broncos. You have to be if you want to get into that late first round conversation for a right tackle specifically. The offensive line is in shambles, but right now you got to keep Dalton Reisner. You don't have any sort of other choice, in my opinion. The guard class there's one guy, basically he's here. We're watching him in practice. Other than that, I'm not drafting a guard this year to put plug and play like Mace is saying. At the tackle position, it's a different story. But we're dealing on what they have or don't have right now. But a tag and trade scenario, a trade of some of your other assets, this could lead the Broncos back towards that first round where some of that better talent is available. And trust me, when Mace, we were in Vegas over the weekend. We're in Mobile right now. I can see you right now. There's plenty of nice mid-round talent for the Broncos. George Payton's got to be right. You got to be on the money. None of this screwing around, taking chances on these long shot picks. George Payton, this draft is the most important draft for the Broncos history.
How much do you both believe that they got their guy in Sean Payton? And we've heard so many of the rumors that have gone around Jim Harbaugh, D'Amico Ryans. Do you at all believe that it was Sean Payton all along?
No, I think Jim Harbaugh was the first choice. I think that was the first option, and then you went down the list. And I mean, we were talking about a few weeks ago that it seemed everything. It seemed like it was all about Harbaugh being the first option, the connections that are there, just the fact that he wouldn't have cost draft compensation. I think if you look at Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh in terms of coaching quality, they're on the same level, but one costs you draft capital and one doesn't. So you'd rather go with the option that didn't cost you draft capital. So I think I don't think that Sean Payton was the Broncos' first choice, but what matters is he's their last choice.
He's their last choice, and Jim Harbaugh was their first choice. But get the right guy. That's all I care about in this entire situation. Get the right man to lead this team forward. And again, not just for the Russell Wilson area. And Wilson and Peyton are buddies and all this sort of stuff. Like, yeah, that's fine. I'm thinking about the next guy as well. I'm thinking about the guy after that, which I think the Broncos will be looking at rookie quarterbacks to take and upgrade their number 2 position. But, at the end of the day, Sean Payton was that name, but it's more than just the name. It's more than just the sizzle. There's plenty of stake here as well. And I love that from this hire. Again, I honestly didn't think it would happen. Then I got kind of mad over the draft compensation. Then he was nervous about somebody in the ownership group, apparently, or not, or something like that. So it's been this weird roller coaster with Sean Payton. But Mace, Rachel, it's been a fun ride.
It has been a roller coaster. Go ahead, Mace.
It's been a fun ride, but it gets you to a big swing that connects. And we kept hearing big swing. With all respect to if they'd gone back into the pool of names like Brian Callahan, Jonathan Gannon, that's not what you're expecting a big swing to get. And one thing that is key on Sean Payton here is this. We saw that report, I believe it was in December, that Payton was trying to put together an all-star staff. I believe ESPN had that report. And one of the possibilities was even Vic Fangio as defensive coordinator. Now, we've heard Fangio connected to the Miami job, but apparently he hasn't taken it just yet. I mean, are we talking about Vic Fangio coming back to the Broncos staff? Are we talking about Mike Munchak coming back to the Broncos staff? That's the next level of this, is what does the coaching staff look like? Because this is another area where money is no object. The Broncos could conceivably end up with the highest paid coaching staff and an extremely decorated group of coaches around Sean Payton.
Cecil, you said you got your pipe dream in Sean Payton. What's your pipe dream for the supporting cast?
Yeah, the supporting cast includes Mike Munchak. It has to include Mike Munchak. If you're the Denver Broncos, you need to fix this offensive line. You need all hands on deck. You need everybody, because it starts in the trenches. We can talk about Sean Payton and offense and passing game and what he needs Russell Wilson to be. That's fine. But remember, it's also about after Russell Wilson, and it's about that offensive line. You look at what teams can do and how you can win football. And remember, it's about the playoffs. I think Sean Payton puts you in the playoff conversation immediately with the Denver Broncos. But to have sustained success, and I always got to slow down when I say that, sustained success, you look at building in the trenches. This is so important for a guy like Mike Munchak, and you miss his touch, his magic touch. And I'm not going to talk about Butch Berry just yelling at guys all the time. I want to highlight how Mike Munchak was able to take Garrett Bowles, a guy that you weren't picking up the fifth-year option on, a guy that you're washing away as a first-round pick, and then gets through to him. You see Pro Bowl caliber play from Garrett Bowles when healthy. I want that for the rest of these guys. Quinn Miners, who Mason and I saw down here at the Senior Bowl a couple of years ago, How's his development been stunted by Butch Berry? Get the growth back. Grow on the offensive line, grow in the trenches, and win. And that starts with Mike Munchak.
How's the talent looking out there in Mobile, both of you?
It's mixed. I mean, if you're put it this way, if you're looking for a quarterback this year, this isn't the place to find it from what we've seen
Not
so
at all.
far. But if you're looking for linemen, and we're sitting here talking about offensive linemen, you're looking for linemen into the 3rd, 4th round, which is the Broncos' range. There are going to be guys that you can have here, and of course, we saw some others down at the Shrine as well that are probably going to be more early day 3 range. So there are players to be had that can come in and help. No sure things, but. The Broncos have plenty of people down here. They had plenty of people out at the Shrine. George Payton not there, but Darren Muji leading the team, the assistant GM. So I think they're doing their homework down here. I think they'll find some goods.
Well, and I got to be honest, Mason, Rachel, we might have seen better talent in Vegas. Not at every position, but I'm much more excited about some of the prospects we saw in Vegas over the weekend. We'll write about it at denversports.com. You're not going to find quarterbacks here at this game. The Broncos don't need that right now. What you do need is offensive linemen. You need pass rushers. There are some mid-round edge rushers that are very interesting. I think you need more cornerback depth. So for what the Broncos need, again, stinging without the 1st-round pick. That bothers me. It stings. Compensation wasn't too much. I'll get over it. I'll have a cry, and I'll be okay. But for what you still need, edge rusher, cornerback, this class provides that. And you love seeing that, and we're seeing that out here in Mobile today.
And the other thing is, by holding on to next year's 1st-round pick, I can't overstate how massive that is. As I wrote a couple weeks ago at denversports.com, that 1st-round pick next year, that's your escape route. If you can't fix Russell Wilson, that's what you're using as the starting point to trade up or standing pat to get a quarterback to develop under Sean Payton. And so with all the draft talk, I think that's the most important thing. Hang on to next year's 1st-round pick, because that is your contingency plan, is to go into what should be a pretty QB-rich 1st round in 2020.
And I cannot wait for tonight, Mace, because Mobile is a hen house of activity. Rumors flying. The Broncos are going to be the talk of the town. Sean Payton's going to be the talk of the town. The NFL world will react to it. And you and I have boots on the ground here in Mobile. We'll pick it all up. We'll talk about it. It's going to be wonderful. But I think this Payton move, again, puts you in the playoff conversation. How do you stay there? How do you fix Wilson? Who's the next guy in case that doesn't work? So many questions, but just such a key, important offseason. Again, I will reiterate, because you don't have those premium picks for the Broncos, this makes it even incredibly more important. And I know people, what it cares, 4th rounder, 5th rounder, who cares? No, that's the incredibly wrong way to think, especially this year. You have to hit on all of your picks. They're so valuable. That's where this work in Mobile, the work in the weekend at Sean game, that's so critical and key for the Broncos staff.
All right. You said you got boots on the ground. If you hear any good details, I expect both of you on coffee break tomorrow morning. We will let you guys get back to the game. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Rachel.
Cecil Lammy and Andrew Mason, there they go. And there it is. Sean Payton has been traded from the Saints to the Denver Broncos. We'll bring in James Marilat next as we continue our coverage of an exciting day, hopefully, in Broncos country. James, how are you?
I'm great, Rachel. We finally got the white smoke that came from Dove Valley. We now know who the Broncos head coach will be. That is a relief. And look, they landed a big fish. It wasn't probably their first choice. That was Jim Harbaugh. I don't even think it was their second choice, because the report just came out that they spent the better part of today trying to get DeMeco Ryans to take the job here. Couldn't get that done. So then they went with Sean Payton. But look, I don't think it's quite as simple as saying Sean Payton was their 3rd choice and they had to settle for the bronze medalist here. I think they liked Jim Harbaugh and they liked DeMeco Ryans, and they didn't have to give up anything to get those 2 guys. So that would have been their first 2 paths they would have gone down. Sean Payton was 3rd simply because, they had to give up a lot. They had to give up the 1st-round pick and a 2nd-round pick to get Sean Payton and a 3rd. So I think if all things were equal and you didn't have to give up anything for Sean Payton, he would have been probably higher than their 3rd choice. So look, they didn't get left without a chair when the music stopped. That was a good thing. I think they had to walk out of this deal with either Harbaugh, Ryans, or Payton. They got one of them. All is good. And now expectations should be through the roof for the Broncos next year, right? You don't make this trade if it's not about winning now. You don't give up all that if you're not trying to make it work with Russell Wilson and company in 2023 and beyond. So this isn't a long runway. It's not a, hey, let's get to 500 next year. I think the expectations going in are, hey, Sean Payton should do what he did in New Orleans, and that's create an immediate playoff contender.
James, are you impressed or disappointed with the Walton Penner Group and how this whole situation played out?
I don't know that it's fair to say I'm disappointed, right? Like, if you look at the two people they missed out on, well, one of them's staying at Michigan. It's not like Jim Harbaugh chose the Panthers over the Broncos. Sure. D'Amico Ryans did choose the Texans over the Broncos, so they did miss there, but he's got connections. He played there. His wife's family is from there. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like, when John Elway became the Broncos GM, if somebody else would have been throwing a ton of money at him and he decided to do Denver, well, did they really miss out on John Elway? Or was it like, well, yeah, Denver always had the built-in advantage. So I don't think they're huge misses. I don't think we should read too much into it. I don't think it says that the Broncos job is a bad job. Sean Payton ain't walking into a bad job. He would have just gone back to Fox and been a TV guy. So I think overall it's impressive of you had three people, you got to get one of the three, and you were willing to do whatever it took to get one of the three. They got the job done. I think you got to, at the end of the day, tip your cap to them and say, job well done.
What's your take on them not having a first-round pick this year?
Well, it's going to make the Thursday night of the draft a lot more boring. We'll be putting up our feet, and, just kind of watching and seeing if they make any moves. Cecil talked about it. There's still a chance they could trade back into it. But look, if you'd have asked me on Halloween, you got to give up Bradley Chubb and a second-round pick in 2024 for Sean Payton, would I have made that trade? Yeah, I would have. So, 29th pick, it's not like it was number 5 overall. Come draft night, we're going to be much more interested in who the Seahawks take at number 5, because that would have been the Broncos pick, than we are who the Saints take at 29. It's a late first-round pick. I don't think it's the end of the world. Would I have rather had one of the other guys and the first-round pick? Yeah, I'd rather have Jim Harbaugh and the number 1. But I think this is it's a fine alternative. It really is.
Well, and there has to be a little bit of relief too of, hey, it's not a first-time guy. We've seen how that's worked out. We know he has experience. So how is he going to change the culture? And what are you hoping to get out of the culture now of the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, I think he'll come in immediately and everybody will know, hey, that's Sean Payton and he's running the show. And he's a guy who goes to the playoffs almost every year. He's got a Super Bowl ring. Like, there's going to be some cachet with that. I think the Russell Wilson factor, we can talk about, hey, he shouldn't have mattered during the search. But once they hired a coach, whoever it was, he does matter, right? That coach has to work with Russ, has to be able to get the most out of Russ, has to be able to get Russ to realize, hey, you're a football player first and a celebrity second. Sean Payton has the cachet to pull that off. So I think all around it'll be good for resetting the culture down there. There's not going to be any doubt of who's in charge. Sean Payton's running the show. It'll be curious to see what this does to George Payton, right? Does Sean Payton come in and he's got his own GM that he wants to work with on the football side, or is it Payton and Payton? Is that what the combination is going to be? That'll be fascinating to see how that unfolds.
Who do you think will take over as OC?
Well, to some extent, it's a OC in name only, because it's going to be Sean Payton's offense. So they may be calling plays, but he'll be heavily involved with that side of the ball. We shall see, but I don't know. That's going to be the next piece of this, right? It's what was the compensation to the Saints? To some extent, there's interest in, well, what's the compensation to Sean Payton? Not that any of us really care. We're not writing those checks. And then it's, all right, what is the staff? A couple of months ago, we had heard, well, Vic Fangio is going wherever Sean Payton goes. Really? Okay. Is Vic going to be the DC? How's that going to work? Is Ejiro Evero part of that staff? How is that going to all unfold? So that is the next step. Who's coming with Sean Payton? Who's staying? Who's going? That'll be interesting to keep an eye on as well.
And you saw that picture of Sean Payton and Russell Wilson there. We know Russell Wilson had reached out to Sean Payton earlier in this process. What do you expect from this offense this year? Because there are still a few questionable pieces on the offense. All right. We know Russell Wilson has his struggles. We know that the offensive line is terrible. I'm just going to phrase it that way. But we also know that while we had really high hopes for some of the wide receivers, we didn't exactly see the production we were hoping this year. Jerry Jeudy, in my personal opinion, being the exception. So what are you hoping to see out of the offense this year that Sean Payton can't change?
Well, I think we expect to see what we thought we were going to get this past year. And that's an offense that finally gets out of the doldrums, right? It's an offense that, it's not a shock when they get to 20 points. You and I aren't hosting halftime chill talking about them getting to 10 points every single week.
Hallelujah.
It should be an offense that's 24 plus. They should be able to win some games on that side of the ball. They should be able to get the most out of Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Alberto and some of the skill position players here that, quite frankly, haven't lived up to expectations. Part of it's going to also be based on, though, the health of two guys. How does Tim Patrick return from his knee injury? How does Javonte Williams return from his? If they're not 100%, if they're not ready to go, then they got to go find another piece and a more explosive player. I still think they need another receiver because, look, I hope Tim Patrick comes back, but we all saw how long it took Cortland Sutton to turn back into the player he once was. I don't even think he's there yet. And then Javonte Williams, boy, that's a tough one to come back at that position. So they need to get some juice, as we used to hear all the time from coaches of the past. They still need some skill position players. I think offensive line, I think if you can go out and get a right tackle in free agency and just keep everybody else, that includes Dalton Risner, I think they'll be fine there. I'm not as down on this offensive line as some people are.
Oh, okay. Defense. Does Evero stay?
Well, he's starting to run out of places to go as the head coach, right? Now it's only Indianapolis and Arizona that are still in the mix. I've always been a proponent of, listen, if you were a part of the debacle that was 2022, you need to go. That's Evero, Outen, Rosberg, whoever, Lauren Landau, the whole group. I think Sean Payton should bring in his own people at every possible spot. But he needs to do also what Brian Daboll did with the Giants, is just go put together the best staff. Don't bring over just, hey, I worked with this guy in New Orleans, and I know this guy from Dallas. Like, it doesn't have to be 1 degree of separation. What's the best possible staff? I'm not a Vic Fangio guy. I think I've made that perfectly clear over the past few years. But if he brings in Vic as his DC, okay, I can buy into that. That's where Vic's skills lie. He's not a head coach, but is he a really good defensive coordinator? Sure. I don't know that Evero is going to be the answer. Again, he was a guy who was really, really good friends with Nathaniel Hackett. I think it's pretty clear he doesn't think his buddy got a fair shake. I think keeping somebody around who has that perception of the franchise, I think could be detrimental. So it's probably best for both sides, Ejiro Evero and the Broncos, if they part ways and Broncos bring in a new DC, Evero lands somewhere else.
So are you saying you'd rather have Fangio instead of Evero?
It depends, because both of them probably have a little bit of an axe to grind with the Broncos, right?
For
Fangio
sure.
was fired a little over a year ago as the head coach. Honestly, I'd rather have neither. I'd rather go in a completely different direction. But
You got to pick one.
I'd go Evero. I think he's got more upside as a coach. I think their defense was a little bit better this year than it was under Vic. I think they made more plays. They were more opportunistic. But some of the problems still persisted, not being able to get off the field with the game on the line, thinking about Baltimore, thinking about the Raiders game. There were still some of those issues. But Justin Simmons played great, played better under Ejiro Evero than he even did under Vic. I think given the hodgepodge of edge rushers they had to use toward the end of the year, the fact that they were still able to get any pressure on the quarterback, I think was a positive. So I would take Evero. But to me, Evero going to replace DeMeco Ryans and being in San Francisco probably is better for him and better for the Broncos. But then you got to figure out, well, who's coming here? Sean Payton has to bring someone. So my preference would be neither. But if you made me pick, I'd keep Evero over Fangio. But that's a coin flip. That's a tough one.
Last one for you. Score prediction. Or not score prediction. Record prediction. I feel like we're on halftime chill here.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to go – I think it's a 10-win team, and you know me, I love to be an optimist, so let's go 11-6.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I actually just found out that we get you –
Good day in Broncos country, Rachel. This is great.
I agree. I'm with you. We have you for a few more minutes. I know you're going to be joining the drive here shortly, but I'm going to keep you for a little bit longer while I've got you.
Okay.
Is there any concern that you have with Sean Payton becoming the Broncos head coach?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I was out on Sean Payton in terms of putting together my top guys. I was Jim Harbaugh first because I think he has a more impressive resume and you don't have to give up anything for him.
Mm-hmm.
I was DeMeco Ryans once Harbaugh said he was going back to Michigan because I thought DeMeco Ryans is that guy that, 7-8 years from now, you're going to look at it just like we do Kyle Shanahan of like, man, we could have had that guy. I think he's going to be a great head coach. But then it would have been Sean Payton or Dan Quinn. It's like, give me somebody who's done it before, who I know that they know how to win as an NFL head coach, and we won't go through some of the stuff we've gone through with past guys. But, yeah, I think his resume, they go to the playoffs every year in New Orleans, or did. But you know what? You only went to one Super Bowl with Drew Brees, with the Hall of Fame quarterback. That's a little bit of a question mark. I do think he's kind of living off of a onside kick decision 14 years ago. I think the fact that he kind of bailed on New Orleans once it got tough, once the salary cap HE double hockey sticks hit that he helped create, that's a little bit of a concern. Bountygate, I think you have to include that in the equation. Yep. Look, that was Greg Williams, but Sean Payton was the boss. He was in charge of it. It happened on his watch. So, yeah, there are some worries. But, look, Sean Payton knows how to win. He knows how to win in this league. He knows how to put together an offense. It was really good in Dallas as their OC. I think he was really good in New Orleans, getting the most out of Drew Brees. That's a situation where it's like, well, did Sean Payton create Drew Brees or did Drew Brees create Sean Payton? Probably a little bit of both. But I think he'll work well with Russell Wilson. So there's concerns, but I think the positives certainly outweigh the negatives here. All things being equal, would I have rather had Jim Harbaugh? Yeah, because you didn't have to give up anything for him. But I think both of them are guys you're bringing in and you're thinking, you know what, you're going to make us a 10-win team every single year. Fine, sign me up for that. I'm in. I'm not going to worry too much about it.
And see, when I look at it, I look as Drew Brees made Sean Payton. So that's where I have a bit of a harder time gripping onto this idea. But I was also, when, this all started, all these talks started, I was like, Sean Payton, he's a name. He's a big splash. But we also know about the last time the Broncos got a big splash, and that didn't end well either. So I can see where people can be a little bit on the nervous side of this trade.
Yeah, I mean, they've given up 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, and 3 players for Sean Payton and Russell Wilson.
Ugh.
So it better work because you're giving up a lot, right? And does this feel a little bit like, hey, you put all your money on red or black last year with Russell Wilson, you missed, now you're doubling down trying to win it back? It does feel a little bit like that. You're giving up a lot. So, look, if it doesn't work with Sean Payton coming in here as the head coach, and particularly Sean Payton coming in and fixing Russell Wilson, you have the potential to set your franchise back a ton. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to make it work. But if it doesn't, there's a big downside for sure.
No, 100%. James, thank you so much. We really appreciate the time.
No sweat. Thanks for having me.
Again, there it is. Saints trading Sean Payton to the Denver Broncos. It's interesting. Everybody's giving us their opinions, and we appreciate them all coming through. And again, the Saints are getting a first-round pick, which is kind of the big bummer out of it. So there's a lot to talk about as we do welcome in Jake Shapiro, who's actually in studio with me. You guys, this is so cool. We are going to have a full lineup of guests joining us too. We're going to have Mark Schlereth here in just a few minutes. So definitely stay tuned, hang out with us. But again,
crazy.
It's insane. And actually, we're going to move over so you can come over.
Yeah. We're still working this. It's we've got big things coming.
Huge things coming, everybody. I hope you stay tuned. It's a lot of exciting stuff in the near future, but get into it.
So I think the fact that the Broncos, according to this Ian Rappaport report, more or less settled for Sean Payton, and they gave up that type of draft compensation for him, pretty crazy. And DeMeco Ryans clearly was the number 1 candidate. He clearly blew them away with the interviews. All the stuff that came out about Sean Payton last week with maybe there were some quarrels with Broncos ownership. It kind of looks really weird in retrospect, right? Like, did they just fall into Sean Payton?
I've been saying this the entire time, though, from the NFL insider's perspective of what are we doing here? Like, there's been so many different talks. There's been so many different, I guess, rumors at this point about the connection that they had. And now at the end of the day, it almost looks like it doesn't even matter.
Right. And from what we heard, and we hear a lot more just because we work in the media, we're connected with some folks, Jim Harbaugh wanted this job.
Yes.
So the Broncos clearly thought Sean Payton was a better candidate and a better option, including the draft pick compensation, than Jim Harbaugh. And if you think about it, well, Sean Payton does have the championship ring. Jim Harbaugh got close, but didn't get there.
Yep.
And Sean Payton had a long track record of leading the Saints to very successful teams. I kind of settled with James on this and saying they may have underperformed a little bit. And you look at where the Saints are now, he left them in disarray. But could this be exciting? Could he revitalize Russ? Out of all the candidates that we heard from, Sean Payton, I think, was the most likely to revitalize Russ and turn him back into that guy.
Well, and that's because a lot of people have linked him to being the adult in the room. There's been so much of this. They need an adult. They need a dad in the room for Russell Wilson. You can't have all of these, quarterback coach or your own office or those types of things, that the special treatment that Russell Wilson got. So how will Sean Payton come in and demand it be different? That's going to be a huge question for it. But also, does he even? Or does he say, you know what, Russ? I know what you're capable of. I don't need to take away all these things. I don't need to become your dad. I don't need to be the adult in the room. I'm going to allow you to do that, but we're changing this.
Yeah. The only guy that was linked to have talked to a coaching candidate before they were hired was Russell Wilson and Sean Payton.
I know.
There was no other leaks with a coaching candidate and Russell Wilson. So you wonder about that relationship. And I mean, I've got the picture right here. I can pull it up. They are people that know each other. They've been in the game for a long time. Of course, there's probably some mutual respect there. It just makes me wonder how much of an impact Russ may have had on this coaching decision, even though we were all told that he wouldn't.
I'm sure he had some. I don't know if he had a huge say, but I'm sure he voiced an opinion of who would you like to work with? Oh, well, I know Sean Payton. I have a relationship with him, yada, yada, yada. So it's a great question. Do you think he can fix him? And I know everyone hates that word. Everyone's like, oh, they're not fixing Russ, whatever. Do you think Russell Wilson looks different next year?
Do they draft offensive linemen that are capable of blocking the guys in front of him? Because if they do, there's a chance. If not, I don't think there's any chance.
I'm with you.
And I think Russell Wilson last year, even though he was really, really bad, dealt with a lot of injuries. And maybe a healthier Russ, a leaner Russ looks different. I don't think he's ever going to be that MVP candidate guy, but can he be Jimmy Garoppolo with them having a great defense led by Ejiro Evero, if he is indeed the same defensive coordinator? Maybe. Where I tend to worry is if this does go off the rails in year one, we haven't seen the number on the Payton contract. We assume it's going to be a huge figure. Let's say it goes off the rails in year one. You don't have any draft picks this year to draft rookies into next year. So your first overall pick the following season will be on a quarterback. It'll be a quarterback playing with a team of guys that had 5 straight losing seasons around them. So that's where you start to worry, is if you're going to rebuild the Broncos, you need these draft picks. So the Broncos, in my mind, decided today they're all in. This isn't a hedge like Cecil said. In my opinion, this is an all in.
Oh, this is definitely an all in. Again, it's another big splash that we've seen from the Walton Penner Group. They had the big splash with the signing of Russell Wilson. And I know a lot of people had, some questions about that. You and I both also do. But now they've made another splash with Sean Payton. And we do know, at least we can assume, they wanted DeMeco Ryans. It was not going to work out. Therefore, Sean Payton was the next best option, and they had him lined up ready to go.
Yeah. And I think DeMeco Ryans, at least in my mind, was a more appealing guy. Sure. We didn't want the first-time head coach, is what the Broncos said and what a lot of people around here said. I actually wanted the young guy to maybe try something new. We know what Sean Payton can do. I kind of wanted what's in the mystery box, and you're saying, hey, what's in the mystery box here in the show? As Andrew Mason always says, well, it could be Sean Payton. Well, it could have been better than Sean Payton, honestly. And I know Sean Payton's gotten all these accolades and stuff, but I think the history of Denver Broncos football is a very strong defense and a quarterback who's charismatic. We have the strong defense, and there is no proof that it can replicate year over year. Getting that kind of new wave thinking, genius defensive mind in here, I thought would have given a good opportunity for Denver Broncos football to continue on that legacy.
Well, we also want to know what all of you are thinking. So please let us know in the comments if you are happy about this trade. If you're happy Sean Payton is going to be the next coach, our head coach. If you're okay with giving up a first-round draft pick, because that's obviously the big one. Do you think that the Broncos will somehow trade back up? I know they have pretty much nothing to do so, but It's a question.
But let's say they are trading up. You would want something very specific. Is it for an offensive lineman?
I mean, that's the biggest key piece that you need.
Yeah, and they need an edge rusher too. Where I start to worry too, and this is where the Walton Penner Group having all the money in the world is not a concern. I start to worry about the cap stuff because we've talked about Draymond Jones potentially getting the franchise tag, and that's going to raise the Broncos salary cap. Yep. Right now, they're projected to be about $12 million under. Obviously, Randy Gregory, we hope he's healthy next year. But can they find a way to get another edge rusher in free agency and then get a young offensive lineman? I think that's the two big needs this offseason. Mm-hmm. And I think the way you do it, if you were to trade up or if you were to trade for one of those pieces, is you move Courtland Sutton.
I've said I am not opposed to trading Courtland Sutton. I've said it multiple times. Some people don't like that talk at all. But you have Jerry Jeudy. You have hopefully a healthy, full participant out of Tim Patrick. Well, you still have KJ Hamler. Don't forget about him. And I know he's not that big, tall guy like Courtland Sutton. But I think this team needs another dog, and I just don't see Courtland Sutton being it.
Oh, it's not to me a question of whether or not Courtland Sutton is or isn't that guy. To me, it's more of a question of you already have a strength at that position, assuming everyone is healthy, and you have clear weaknesses elsewhere. Mm-hmm. You deal from a position of strength to solve that weakness. And for my mind, the guy you didn't mention is the biggest part of this, Greg Dulcich.
Oh,
we saw how important the tight ends were in the championship games. Yep. The tight end is the most important position on the offense besides the quarterback now. So if you're asking me, if Greg Dulcich is that dude and you've got two solid wide receivers, which I would say Jerry Jeudy's more than solid, mm-hmm. and Tim Patrick is solid when he is healthy, that's a really good receiving core. Mm-hmm. So I don't see the need for Courtland Sutton in that cap number. I think you would rather have, what we talked about, a good edge rusher, a good offensive line to make sure Russ has the time to actually hit Greg Dulcich and Tim Patrick and Jerry Jeudy.
I'm with you. Offensive line, though, you desperately need help there. And I know if you can move the wide receivers, then maybe there's a possibility, but it just doesn't seem likely. So I think you're going out this year with no first-round draft pick, no second-round pick, right? They did trade away the second-round pick this year.
Yeah, and
then they're getting
let me put up the Payton comp too right now.
Yeah,
so
there we go.
The Payton comp is this: confirming Sean Payton will be the Broncos' next head coach. Broncos send their first-round pick, number 29 overall, 2024 second, while getting Saints 2024 third. So they've already traded their 2023 in the Seattle deal. So it's 2 years in a row they won't have that second-round pick. And of course, they didn't have it last year. So 3 years in a row without a second.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, man, it is tough. All right, but we will bring in the man, the myth, the legend. It is Mark Schlereth joining us. Mark, how are you today?
Rachel, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Big news. Sean Payton coming to Denver. What's your first take?
Well, he was my number one choice, so I'm really excited. I'm good friends with Sean Payton, and I've known him for years. I've actually done some work in a consulting role with the Saints when he was the head coach there. So I couldn't be more excited. He's a great football coach and does an unbelievable job in regards to personnel groupings and putting people together formationally, finding one-on-one matchups. And he's done great work with quarterbacks over the years. So this is just a home run for me. And like I said, he was my first choice to be the coach of the Broncos. Man, I couldn't be more excited for him.
Stink, for the people that aren't so high on it, myself included, what would you say to them to say, you know what, get excited because Denver Bronco football is back?
Well, I did a Saints game this year, and I was in that facility, and somebody within the facility who has been around this game for a very long time said, you know what the Saints are missing? They're missing Sean Payton, and they're missing the fear factor. Not only the reverence that the players had for Sean Payton, but also just a straight up fear. Not only the players, but the coaches. There's an accountability factor when he's in charge of the organization. And it's very much like Mike Shanahan. Like, I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt, Mike Shanahan, if I didn't perform, Mike Shanahan had cut me, and he wouldn't even think twice about it. And Mike Shanahan and I were tight. But I knew that aspect of him. Also knew the way he ground on coaches. And made sure, if your group didn't play up to snuff, man, that coach was in jeopardy of losing his job. So that fear factor is real. That fear factor is important in this game. And there's no question that Sean brings it. I'll tell you the other thing Sean does. I went and like I said, when I was consulting there, I showed up at training camp. This was before I was consulting, actually. I showed up at training camp, and Sean grabbed me, and I was there watching my son pitch in the minors. And Sean grabbed me. I called up and said, "Hey, man, I'm going to come over to practice." He grabs me as as the team is stretching, and he runs me into the facility, and he walks me through the entire facility. He said, "Hey, this off season, we redid the lockers, and we put in like drying mechanisms, shoulder pad dryers and helmet and it went through all this." He was so excited. He goes, "And then last year," he goes, "every year I want to do something special for my players, so when they come back to OTAs, man, they get excited about being here. And last year we did this, hydrotherapy unit, and we did this cryovac area, and then the year before that," and he went through the entire facility. Then we come back out to the practice, and he says to me, now, people have talked about his ego. He says to me, "If you see anything in this practice that you don't think is right, that you don't think we're doing right, stop practice and let me know, or stop practice and let the group know."
Wow.
I was just there as a visitor. I wasn't in any official capacity, but stop my practice and get involved in the drills. Now, I've heard a lot of people think, "Oh, he's an egotistical, this, that, and the other." Really? That stuff doesn't happen. And so I have a lot of respect for him as a football coach and what he has done. And he's been an exceptional coach in a situation. And let's face it, in New Orleans, man, it's not an ownership with deep pockets. So they have done this without being able to outspend people. And that to me means a lot when it comes to how good a job he's done in New Orleans.
Mark, it's those types of stories that change your outlook on a person. And to hear that type of story, I'm like, wow. How much do you believe Sean Payton will change the culture of the Denver Broncos this fall?
Oh, I think they're in for a very rude awakening. and I think that's a good thing. And I've said this for years, I think a lot of people think they practice hard and think they work hard and think they prepare and think they study. And I think you're going to get a real dose of reality the way Sean Payton comes in here and operates, the way he game plans and the attention to detail that he has for his football team. So I think this is going to be something that will be shocking to a lot of players and even some coaches.
So you're telling me no field days this year?
I don't know. I doubt it, but you never know. Maybe a field day if they're really performing well. We'll see.
Okay, record prediction before we let you go.
Oh shoot. They'll compete for a wild card spot.
It's a positive. I think Broncos country will take that at this point.
Yeah, if we haven't been in the playoffs in 7 years, so yeah, we'll take a wild card spot would be great.
All right, Mark. Thank you so much for your time. Drive safely. Get home safely.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, there's Mark Schlereth as we welcome in his partner in crime on the morning show. We've got Mike Evans. Mike, how are you this morning?
I'm great. It's an honor to follow Popo. That was Mark in line, getting ready to pick up his grandkids at school. So great to follow Mark Schlereth, a.k.a. Popo.
Oh, how sweet. All right, I love that. But let's get into the dirty news. Sean Payton is going to be the next Broncos head coach. The Saints trade him over to the Broncos. What's your first take on it?
Oh, I love it. I was on with you just last week here on this show, and I was going through the whole laundry list of reasons why you should not be afraid to hire Sean Payton, why you should try to resuscitate this. And this was at the time where it looked like maybe that Payton ship had sailed. I'm ecstatic, not only because I wanted a coach that had coached before, but a lot of these coaches that have coached before, they come with a certain amount of baggage because they were fired in the last place that they coached. That wasn't the case with Payton. He walked away of his own choice. And this notion that he, was burned out and had lost his zest for coaching. He was going to coach the Miami Dolphins this past year. There was a 5-year, $100 million contract in place. He was going to coach the Dolphins, and then that fell apart with all the drama surrounding the Dolphins. So this is a guy who wants to coach. He has a proven track record. He has a proven track record offensively. He has a proven track record when it comes to working with quarterbacks, developing quarterbacks, getting the best out of quarterbacks. He also has shown in his time in New Orleans to be a pretty good evaluator of talent. Remember, there was that stretch where they went 7-9, 7-9, and 7-9, and they were able to rebound from that and string together 4 straight 10-plus win seasons because of some really good drafting. So piggybacking a little bit on what Mark had to say, you get an adult in the room immediately, and you get somebody who not only has a chance to fix Russell Wilson, but I never endorse the idea of Payton just because, hey, this is the best chance to save Russell Wilson. This is somebody who I anticipate will be here for a long time, 5, 7, 10 years. So I feel pretty confident that, hey, maybe he can change Russell Wilson. Maybe he can revitalize Russell Wilson's career. But if he can't, I also feel pretty confident that whatever the next plan is at quarterback after Russell Wilson, I love the idea of this guy being in charge of it.
What type of game do you see Russell Wilson playing? D-Mac and I were talking this morning on coffee break, and he was naming off all the QBs in the AFC, right? And they're all young, and they're all able to move, like Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. How can you make Russell Wilson fit into that when he's obviously older, not as lean, not as mobile? So what can Sean Payton do to effectively make Russell Wilson be able to compete in this very, very tough conference?
Well, what you got to remember is you don't need a running quarterback. You need a mobile quarterback. And I think Russell Wilson can still be a mobile quarterback for quite some time. Now, he needs to do a few things. He needs to make a commitment or recommitment to gain in some better shape as he gets a little bit older. But there's no reason why he can't do that. So I feel confident that Russell Wilson still has a lot of football left in him if he's coached properly. If he's directed properly, if he is ordered properly, then I think Russell Wilson can still play at a high level. But if you're talking about what it's going to take to compete in the AFC, yeah, I think that you should take a good look at the Philadelphia Eagles and take a good look at the way that this team was built and really built quickly, considering how they were in the Super Bowl just a few years ago, then fell upon some tough times. Remember, it was just a couple of years ago, they took Devontae Smith, the receiver out of Alabama, I think with the 6th pick overall. So it was just a couple of years ago, they were picking in the top 10. And look at where they are now. So I think if you're looking at the combination of Sean Payton, Russell Wilson, let's do some team building like the Eagles did. There's no reason why you can't compete. There's a very good chance that Jalen Hurts and the Eagles beat the Chiefs here in a couple of weeks, and there will be all the proof you need that, yeah, the Broncos easily can compete in the AFC.
It's George Payton with this team after the draft.
After the draft, I think Payton is on solid. George Payton. We got too many Paytons around here. I think George Payton's on solid ground for this season. I'm reminded of when John Elway took over and he came aboard and he understood, or he learned very quickly, wow, there's a lot to get caught up on when it comes to running the Denver Broncos. So Brian Zanders was the general manager at the time, and John kept him around. And it was Zanders was there for a year to really kind of help John kind of get his bearings and learn the lay of the land when it came to running the Broncos. And I can see George Payton and Sean Payton having that same kind of relationship. And then it's up to George Payton to show that he's worth keeping around after this.
I think it's going to be very interesting because we talked about granted, they didn't really have a second interview process, but essentially a second conversation, if there was going to be had one, with Greg Penner, Rob Walton, and Carrie Ann Penner in the room, or Carrie Ann Walton Penner, excuse me, in the room, but George Payton wasn't. So it was going to depend, we believe, on what Sean Payton said about George Payton's future, right? There are a lot of Paytons now in this group, in this conversation, that we're going to have to definitely separate them when we talk about them.
Yeah, I think that had to be a conversation that was had because when you're talking about people like Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, they're the kind of A-lister type candidates that are going to be able to command and demand a lot of power. And so you have to have that conversation without George Payton in the room. It has to be, hey, Sean, how do you proceed moving forward? How do you envision your working relationship with your general manager? Is it somebody you want to hand pick? Do you want final say? I think, and the details will come out, but look, I would think that from this point forward, Sean Payton is the final voice, the final authority when it comes to all decisions made with the Denver Broncos as a football team. He now has the final say, but that doesn't mean that he and George Payton can't work together and work together very well. Look at Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Kyle Shanahan hired John Lynch. Kyle Shanahan picked John Lynch to be his general manager, and clearly they've worked well together. So I guess the question is, can Sean Payton and George Payton work well like that, or is George Payton on borrowed time?
All right, we just got off this phone with Sean Payton from Jeff Duncan. He's stoked about the chance to coach the Broncos. Great fan base, great tradition. The ownership group is fantastic, and I love the way they competed last year. It's a great football city like we had in New Orleans. More to come soon. I love the way they competed last year, Mike. What?
Yeah, that's just happening. Okay, that's just being nice. Okay. By the way, Jeff Duncan, congratulations. You finally got something right.
Can you believe, real quick, let's just talk about the amount of stories that have come out that absolutely changed within like 20 minutes or an hour?
I think the thing that we learned about all of this saga throughout all of this is there's a lot of people in our business who claim that they know a lot and have a lot of inside information and a lot of sources, and that's been proven to be wrong throughout this, because plenty of people attach their names to this or that, or this will happen or this won't happen. Give the Broncos credit throughout all of this. The folks, the insiders, the Mike Klisses, the Troy Ranks, the Adam Schefters, they've all been consistent in saying, hey, if you're looking for information on this, you're not getting it from the Broncos. You're going to have to get it from the opposite side, whoever we're talking about. Jeff Duncan, Colin Cowherd talking about Sean Payton, Joel Klatt, Brock Heward talking about Jim Harbaugh. So it was always the other side of things, which left so many people scrambling. I know for Bronco fans out there watching this, it got old after a while, but I loved it, honestly. I thought it was fun. Hey, 90% of sports talk, 90% of the time you get together with your friends and you start talking sports, it's all about speculation anyway. So I thought it was a blast to try to read the tea leaves and connect the dots and try to anticipate where this thing was going. But from the beginning, my number one choice was Sean Payton. I kept fighting for the idea of make sure you get back to Sean Payton. Don't let this be the end. Don't worry if people close to him are saying things that maybe are irritating the Broncos. Get over it, repair the relationship, start over if you have to. But in the end, they got the right guy. Absolutely got the right guy.
They are giving up a first-round pick, though, for the right guy, which makes a lot of people concerned.
Rachel, who cares, really? I mean,
what can they do with the O-line, though? That's where the struggle is. I think Russell Wilson can't have that mobility if he can't move because he's getting tackled to the ground after 3 seconds.
Yeah, I get it. And I know that the draft has become a big deal. It's been turned into a big deal by the NFL and ESPN, and it's become a whole cottage industry for people who want to cover the NFL draft and analyze it. But the fact remains is that you're talking about a late first round pick, and if you're finding the coach that you think can really make a difference here, and you go back and look at all the things that Mark Schlereth just said about Sean Payton, how he'll come in, command the room, command the building, add in his X's and O's ability. You put all that together, then his value to this franchise moving forward dwarfs giving up a late first round pick. As I've been saying throughout, you didn't even have this first round pick at the beginning of November. And if I had told you back in November, I think I did say it at the time because we started immediately speculating about the idea of using this first round pick for Sean Payton. But if I had told you back in November before the trade deadline, hey, Rachel, I can trade you Bradley Chubb and a future second round pick for Sean Payton and a future 3rd-round pick, you'd jump at it, wouldn't you? You would jump at it, especially if you found out that pick wasn't going to be until the 29th pick in the 1st round. I just think that we had too many people who got caught looking at the short-term view of the draft and the idea of, oh my goodness, this year's draft. I think you have to place that in the context of the next 3, 5, 7, maybe next decade. And I'm telling you, I am more than confident that the price that the Broncos are giving up for Sean Payton is a minuscule price to pay to get a guy like this.
Well, and when you phrase it like that, of course, you're like, this is a great freaking trade. I love this trade. And I do think, well, it is a very good trade. I still think there are concerns that some people have to be had. I have been the fact that I think Drew Brees made Sean Payton and less that Sean Payton made Drew Brees. People can argue with me on that if they want, but we're going to find out, especially here in Denver, if it was on Nathaniel Hackett or Russell Wilson, depending on what happens this upcoming season. And it's going to be a fun one, Mike. I'm excited for it.
I haven't been this excited since they traded for Russell Wilson. And how that turned out.
Conversations before.
How'd that turn out?
We do have some really good stats. Okay, since 2006, Sean Payton has produced 9+ wins in an NFL season 10 times. Since 2006, the Broncos have done the same just 6 times. So that's an interesting stat too. And then, of course, you look at the Broncos' 1st-round picks since 2013. Patrick Surtain, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, Bradley Chubb, Garrett Bowles, Paxton Lynch, Shane Ray, Bradley Roby, and Sylvester Williams. A lot of the names on that list, they're kind of just names at this point, Mike. So your point stands of why people get so hooked up on the draft when you don't always get the best talent out of it either.
And if you're, can I do a quick little pushback on about Drew Brees making Sean Payton? Remember,
absolutely,
Drew Brees was a quarterback with the the San Diego Chargers at the time, and the Chargers thought so much of Drew Brees that they drafted Eli Manning and then traded him for Phillip Rivers. So Phillip Rivers was on the Chargers with Drew Brees, and the Chargers had already made up their mind that they were going to move on from Drew Brees. Now, that got sped up when John Lynch, back to him again as a player, wrecked his shoulder while playing for the Broncos, and that put Brees out there to be had by anybody. He goes to New Orleans. He gets connected with Sean Payton. The rest is history. So I would push back on you that Drew Brees made Sean Payton. I think you can easily, and I'll always, when you have the great quarterback, okay, I've always been consistent, so I'm not going to be hypocritical here. I'll always take the great quarterback over the great coach. But in this case, Sean Payton had a huge role in making Drew Brees into the quarterback that he was.
So can Russell Wilson still be a great quarterback?
Great. That's why I go back to the Eagles model. I think you're definitely going to have to go with the idea, the hope that Drew Brees, that Russell Wilson can be a really good quarterback, but you got to have to build a really good team around him.
So Russell Wilson's days of being a great quarterback have come to an end. A really good one, though. What's the difference between great and really good in your mind?
Well, really great is a quarterback who's going out there. He's Patrick Mahomes. He's throwing for 45 touchdowns, 40 touchdowns in a season, 5,000 yards. That's great. Okay. Really good in the level that Russell Wilson can be at. I think you're looking more at 35 touchdown passes, 35 touchdown passes, 4,500 yards. That puts you in the really good category. There are only a couple of really great quarterbacks in today's NFL. Unfortunately, the Broncos have the best. The best of the best is in their own division. But again, watch the Super Bowl here in a couple of weeks, and you might see a case where a really good quarterback surrounded by a better team beats Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And if that happens and the Eagles are favored to do so, then you got your answer right there as to what the possibility is with the Broncos and why it's not hopeless having Patrick Mahomes in your division.
There it is. National or NFC Championship, excuse me. There he was wearing the orange Ty, I'm assuming that this was on Sunday. He was rocking the Broncos gear already. He knew the talks were going on, but it has been an absolute blast. To everybody that has hung out with us for the last hour, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. Mike, you too for the time. I know this kind of came out of nowhere. Obviously, we were all sprung by the news, but I do ultimately think it is good news for Broncos country as Sean Payton is traded to the Denver Broncos to be the next head coach. Mike, let's do this thing. Let's have a good training camp this year.
Let's do this.
All right, there he is. Hired Sean Payton, the next head coach of the Denver Broncos. Everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. for coffee break. And then Cecil and Mace will be with you tomorrow afternoon for Orange and Blue today at 3:30. Have a great day, everybody. Broncos country. Let's go.